The Natal Astrology of Paul McCartney. Was his fate written in the stars? So I'm going to start by taking you to a footnote on page 162 of Memoirs. According to Aleister Crowley, the Aeon of Osiris would become the Aeon of Horus by the Osiris-Horus reenactment. Osiris would incarnate from the womb of heaven, be slain, and then, as before, migrate to the living Horus. Combining as one, they would transform the world for the new age. Osiris would be born when the sun points to the star at Osiris' right shoulder. The ancient Egyptian constellation of Osiris, now called Orion, depicts Orion as a hunter. At his right shoulder, we see the ninth brightest star as seen from Earth. That bright reddish star, Betelgeuse, beetle blood, is larger than Jupiter's entire orbit. Richard Balducci tells us that its mass is 6,660,000 times that of Earth. Moreover, he confirms that on the 18th of June 1942, when Paul was born, the Sun was conjunct Betelgeuse at 26 degrees Gemini, and that the Sun and Betelgeuse were thus in exact opposition to the womb of the Milky Way galaxy, a dark section from a black hole at 26 degrees Sagittarius. Reading that made me think that clearly the occultist had planned for someone born under very specific circumstances to be Osiris reborn, for him to then be slain and his soul transmigrated into the living Horus. And I wondered what the sky looked like at the moment of Paul's birth. We can actually look at it. Here's a map I took from skymaponline.net, and you'll notice that it adjusted the time, I think, to UTC. If I zoom in, we see this part here. The sun, I've put a little ring in red at the top of the picture. And if you go down the picture, you'll see an orange star, that's Betelgeuse, on the shoulder of Orion. And that's what they're talking about that particular conjunction. They're near each other, basically. And all this talk about Betelgeuse is quite interesting because it's a fixed star. And in someone's chart, you've got a fair chance that some celestial body will be conjunct Betelgeuse. I know in my natal chart, the moon is conjunct Betelgeuse, for example. But far more importantly, if you look at historical events, particularly wars and battles, World War I, World War II, the Iraq Wars, things like that, an awful lot of key events took place when usually either the Sun or Saturn was conjunct Betelgeuse. What does all of that mean? I don't know, but it certainly matters, it seems, to the occultists. And this also made me think about page 69 of Memoirs, where they print the real Paul McCartney's natal chart, his astrological chart. And in the whisper message, which appears probably to you like a grey sort of fog on the left-hand side of the page, they actually write the details from that chart. And I found this really quite curious because I've put Paul's details into at least 4 different pieces of online astrological software, and they all come out looking the same way, and it's the exact opposite to this. It's like the image has been flipped, and I'll show you what I mean. So this is what his chart looks like, and as I say, I've tried various different online software to generate charts. This one's from AstroSeek, and they all end up looking more or less the same. So I've included this chart and all of the planetary positions and houses and elements and things in case anyone wants to take a closer look themselves. and for anyone who has an interest in astrology. The dominant planets, which I think are very interesting, because Mercury is his dominant planet, which is, for occult reasons, very interesting, because Mercury, Hermes Trismegistus, and Thoth, or Tote, or Thoth, or however you like to pronounce his name, they're all the same thing. They're all the same entity or idea, and they're all connected to magic. And at the time when he was born, Mercury was in retrograde, that is, from the position of Earth, it appeared to be moving backwards. The Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn made correspondence between the movements of planets and the tarot. And when Mercury moves in retrograde, it's the equivalent of the Magician card reversed, which is associated with black magic and trickery. So that's very interesting that that aspect turns up very frequently throughout Paul's chart. And here we have some more details. Again, these are just for people who are interested in this sort of thing and they want to look these things up. And we're going to go through all of these things, or most of these things, in a moment. And in fact, this is our agenda. So there's lots of different aspects to a natal chart. So first of all, we're going to look at the 10 planets and a couple of guests, asteroids and such like. We're going to look at the planets moving through the 12 signs of the zodiac. Then we're going to look at the 12 signs of the zodiac moving through the 12 houses. The 12 houses govern different aspects of someone's life. Then we're going to look at the planets moving through the houses. And then we'll look at the planetary aspects, that is, how the planets line up against each other and how they react with each other. So we'll start with the planets moving through the zodiac. And we'll start with the most basic and obvious thing to note, which is that Paul was born with the sun in Gemini. These are some general observations about people who are Gemini. They are intelligent and quick-witted, interested in their environment and can quickly adapt to it, open to novel ideas in the world because they can quickly see their advantages. They're good-humoured and sociable people. They inspire and influence others with their innate charm and vigour. They're creative people, often good at public speaking and writing. They can appear shallow and restless, but are actually capable of great concentration. And they're not generally dogmatic in their approach to life, and no experience is seen as wasted. Now, as I said before, the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn corresponded tarot to astrology. And the period of time from the 11th to the 20th of June corresponds to the 10 of Swords. And I've shown you both the Rider-Waite-Smith and the Thoth deck, Crowley's deck. Crowley called this card Ruin, which pretty much says it all. But actually, I think it's the Rider-Waite-Smith card and its depiction that really says it all. It's a guy on the ground, dead, with 10 swords in his back. It's about being backstabbed. It's about betrayal and violent enemies. And if we think about how Paul died, because he was murdered, let's not mince words, then that seems incredibly, horribly apt. If, by the way, your birthday is between the 11th and 20th of June, then I'm really sorry that this is your card. Anyway, we'll move on to the moon in Leo. And so these are some general observations about people with this placement. They have proud feelings and dramatic reactions and are often prone to sulking. They feel at home in the limelight and can be a social leader. They have powerful instincts to give and receive with a strong sense of integrity and justice. They have the strength and courage of their own convictions, a strong need to organize their environment and the lives of loved ones. They're selective about their friends, but loyal in affections and have a strong need to be loved. They can be stubborn and self-centered, and they have a taste for splendor. And so the moon doesn't actually correspond to the moon tarot, it actually corresponds to the high priestess. We'll get to the moon tarot later, it corresponds to Pisces. So the high priestess is connected to secret knowledge and intuition. And often when I have done tarot spreads and when my My good friend Jen from Countess Powers has done tarot spreads on Paul, on his story, particularly his death. The High Priestess is a frequent card that comes up and normally indicates the involvement of occult societies and secret societies like the Freemasons. So there's also that connotation. And here we have Leo, which corresponds to the Strength card in Rider-Waite-Smith, which is called the Lust card in the Thoth deck. And either way, it does have a connotation of strength and courage. But on the Lust card, we actually see Babylon riding the seven-headed beast of Revelation. So that's a very different connotation there. By the way, that spelling of Babylon is correct. That's how Crowley spelt it, for, I think, reasons to do with gematria. So we have Mercury in retrograde in Gemini. These are some of the connotations of that placement. A logical, versatile mind, capable of processing a lot of information quickly. They can seem scattered because of their eclectic interests. Often articulate and witty, good at problem solving, fast learners but easily bored and distracted, and fickle opinions. Gemini corresponds to the Lovers card in the tarot, which is about major choices, love, partnerships, and harmony. And, unsurprisingly, Mercury corresponds to the Magician card, or the Magus card. And because it's retrograde, it's reversed. So the connotation is of black magical skill and knowledge, and also blocked creative energy. So now we have Venus in Taurus. So these are some of the typical connotations of this placement. May be slow to love, but passionate and loyal when they do. Can be possessive if emotional security is uncertain. Highly sensual people who like physical expressions of love. And people who expect dependability from their relationships. So Taurus corresponds to the Hierophant, which is about traditional institutions and values, religious instruction, and patient practice. So this is basically wise counsel. In the Thoth deck, he is a different sort of character. He is still a pope of sorts, but he is a pope and magician of the Aeon of Horus. Whereas in the Rider-Waite-Smith set, and any deck derivative of that set, he is very much a Hierophant of the Aeon of Osiris. So he has a different vibe to him. And Venus corresponds to the Empress, which is a very womanly card, very motherly. It's about the creation of life, happiness, beauty, success, and is also about the alchemical white tincture of salt. So then we come to Mars in Leo, which is said to bring a strong sense of ambition for a calling, which they will have the willpower and charisma to achieve. Tirelessly and consistently enterprising, they can uplift others through self-confidence, the tremendous vitality and passion, able to take on risks. They have a strong sense of pride in what they do, pouncing on anyone who tries to humiliate them. In practical schemes, a tendency to be self-publicizing and extremely vain, and romantic with a strong desire for sex. And I suspect quite a lot of that is actually true about Paul. Obviously, we can't know because we don't know him. But it is interesting to note that this placement is one of the few that corresponds specifically to one card. And that one card in the tarot is the Seven of Wands, which is the card of valor. It's about standing your ground, courage, and often victory in the face of opposition. It's quite a strong card. It's someone who's up against the odds, which I suppose he was with the Beatles. So next we have Jupiter in Cancer. And this corresponds to a strong sense of family, seeking to create a comfortable environment, supporting others in need, powerful emotions which cloud reason, faith based on gut feeling, sentimental about the past, and good luck follows when acting in a sympathetic and charitable way to save and accumulate. And so we have Cancer, which corresponds to the Chariot. And the Chariot card is about victory and overcoming obstacles, discipline, focus. In the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, and also for Crowley, we see that the sort of 69 shaped glyph, which represents Cancer, is seen in very sexual terms, and hopefully I don't have to explain what a 69 is, or that in such position you will mutually exchange fluids, which is why it is related to Cancer, which is a water sign. On Crowley's version of this card, the figure there is actually holding the Holy Grail. So there's a lot more going on in the Crowley version of that card. Jupiter corresponds to the Wheel of Fortune, which is about the change of fortune, which could be good or bad, although normally it's good. It's about karma, expansion, and it also includes 3 alchemical primes on the middle of the wheel. So next we have Saturn in Gemini. So this placement suggests a well-ordered, sometimes calculating mind, an aptitude for research, good concentration, a distrust of the irrational, precise or uninhibited expression, a dislike of small talk or superficial people, and those who may secretly have an intellectual inferiority complex. So Gemini corresponds to the Lovers, which we've seen before, major choices, love, partnerships, and harmony. And Saturn corresponds to the World, otherwise known as the Universe card, and that corresponds to success, achievement of goals, and for Crowley, the completion of the great work. Next we have Uranus in Gemini. This placement suggests people who are independent and original in thinking, innovative ideas and methods, a love of new or unusual social contacts, restlessness leading to incomplete projects, poor mental self-discipline, can be unreliable and impractical, and a love of freedom. So a bit more rebel ideas coming through here. And that's not very surprising. We have again Gemini, which corresponds to the Lovers again, major choices, love, partnerships, and harmony. But Uranus is now corresponding to the Fool card. Traditional astrology only uses 7 planets, but they included 10 in the whisper message in Memoirs, so I'm going to be faithful to that instead. And when the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn corresponded the tarot with astrology, they did not include Uranus or Neptune or Pluto. So these have been grafted onto the system. And it does make sense. The Fool, which actually is meant to correspond to the element of air for the Golden Dawn and certainly for Crowley, that card is being seen as equivalent to or sharing the qualities of Uranus, which are originality, freedom, and revolution. So I can see how those two things would match up. Next we have Neptune in Virgo. Typical ideas that come from this placement would be a mental sensitivity and a powerful imagination which needs practical outlets. People who are highly perceptive or intuitive, easily influenced by those with strong beliefs, false judgments, disorganization due to a confused state of mind, often victims of psychosomatic illness or feeling psychologically ill at ease. And I think this is sort of interesting. I always got the impression with Paul that if he hadn't met John, none of the rest of his life would have worked out the way that he did. it was very, very important that they met. And certainly I think that although he was fairly strong-minded, I always got the impression that certain people like John could very easily influence him. So I found this sort of interesting. And also, if we think about the way that he is talked about in memoirs, I think they very deliberately made him feel psychologically ill at ease. And maybe they knew that they could do that before they killed him. I think they were trying to make him feel ill at ease. We have Virgo, which corresponds to the Hermit. And the Hermit card is about illumination from within. It's about soul seeking and searching. And it's also about isolation. He is, after all, a hermit. And Neptune, another grafted on card, corresponds to the Hanged Man, which actually normally corresponds to water as an element. And again, it makes a sort of sense. Neptune's qualities of illusion, intuition, and spiritual ideas are reflected in the Hanged Man, and both of them have aquatic connotations, but the card is mostly about sacrifice, feeling trapped, and stagnation. So next we have Pluto in Leo. So this placement indicates people who are prone to excessive pride, the idea of re-evaluating one's understanding of what power means, perhaps leading to misuse, fighting for one's individuality by resisting tyranny or mass ideologies, which almost seems like an irony, using arrogance to disguise a lack of confidence, which, if you're a performer, I guess you have to do for at least part of the time, and transformation through creativity, often leading to a significant position in society, which one way or the other was definitely true. So we have Leo, which again corresponds to strength or lust, and we have Pluto, which corresponds to judgment, which is called the Aeon in the Thoth deck. Pluto's qualities of transformation, regeneration, power, and the concept of the Last Judgment have all been grafted on and reflected into the Judgment card, which seems very reasonable. But the Aeon card replaces the Judgment card in Crowley's deck because he thought that the Judgment card was redundant in the Aeon of Horus, because the Judgment card is literally an archangel sounding the horn and waking the dead and calling them to their last judgment. As far as Crowley was concerned, that was an idea that was a relic of the past in the Aeon of Horus. So it has a very different vibe, although transformation and regeneration are still concepts that you can see within the Aeon card. So now we have a quite modern idea, Lilith in Gemini. I didn't include this in memoirs, but I thought I'd include it anyway because it came up every time I calculated Paul's chart with different pieces of software. It popped up anyway. So I thought I'd include it for the hell of it. So Lilith is a fictional point. It's the second empty focal point of an elliptical orbit of the moon around the Earth. So it's basically a space. And it's associated with primal urges and the unconscious desires. Lilith in Gemini suggests ambiguous communication, fascination with ambiguity and shadows, the search for identity, a desire for knowledge and information, and thoughts that are free and subject to the constant process of change. A carefree and nomadic mindset, people who make friends easily, people who desire to meet non-conformist and unusual people, and folks who say wicked things in anger. And that one in particular makes me think of the outbursts that Paul had with Stu Sutcliffe, Pete Best, even Brian Epstein. Paul struck me as someone who had a very bad temper on an extremely long fuse. and it took a long time to burn through. But once he was cross, he was really cross. And I can totally relate to that because I'm exactly the same. So anyway, we have Gemini again, the lovers, major choices, love, partnerships, and harmony. There's no card that corresponds to Lilith, so I've just included what is generally regarded as the first or earliest depiction that we can find. A very interesting image that I think might actually also correspond perhaps to other characters like Ishtar and Inanna and maybe Babylon herself. But there we go. Let's move on. So now we have the North Node in Virgo. And the North Node, I've put retrograde here, but the reality is that North Node is nearly always moving retrograde, so there's nothing particularly unusual about that. We have North and South Node, and they are lunar points. They aren't planets. They are astrologically mathematical points that are directly opposite each other in the chart. They are about life lessons that are meant to be gained in this life, possibly carried over from the past. And both lunar nodes are almost always retrograde, as I said before. So a North Node in Virgo brings conflict between the rational and the irrational, between dreams and reality, between self-adjustment and self-sacrifice. So there's a conflict there. People with this lunar node pairing want to escape into a dream world and avoid everyday routine reality. They can be unreliable and want to isolate themselves from the world. And his North Node is Virgo. That corresponds to the Hermit. So illumination from within and isolation. And that means that his South Node corresponds to Pisces, which is the Moon card. And that is about illusion, deception, and the light created from the dark, which illuminates dreams and nightmares. So now we have Chiron in Leo. And Chiron is an asteroid between Saturn and Uranus. Its orbit is very unusual and represents a bridge between the material and spiritual worlds. So according to the mythology, Chiron was a great healer and an immortal centaur. And he was injured by a poisonous arrow and then ironically could not heal himself. So in astrology, Chiron symbolizes our incurable trauma and injuries. And Chiron in Leo manifests itself normally in one of two ways. Either people with this placement feel that no matter what they do, they are not accepted by others with the recognition that they believe they deserve. Or, whilst they seek the limelight, they are not sure that they are worthy of it and have great moments of self-doubt. I can well believe that either of those are true. Probably the latter more than the former for Paul, but I can sort of see it. And again, we have Leo, which corresponds to either the strength or lust card. Chiron does not have a card. So now we have the zodiac through the houses. And we will start with the ascendant and descendant. So his ascendant sign is Virgo, which we see in the first house, which is about personality. And this placement typically describes someone who is discriminating, reserved, analytical, methodical, and conscientious. Someone who needs to acquire practical and detailed knowledge of how things work. They like to know how things tick, basically. They're good at learning, but often unable to let go. They can be hypercritical and obsessed with correctness. They're people who will work steadily towards a goal and who don't like taking orders. And the Pisces descendant invites great spontaneity and breaks down an over-rigid sense of boundaries. So the ascendant is Virgo, that corresponds to the Hermit, which again is illumination from within and isolation. And the descendant is Pisces, which is the Moon card, illusion, deception, and the light created from the dark, which illuminates dreams and nightmares. So then we have Libra in the second house, which is about money and possessions. People with this placement often find their income is likely to come from an advantageous marriage, artistic expression, or diplomatic work. Their financial goals are helped by a partnership, and they rarely make money alone. Well, that was certainly true. If he hadn't been part of the Beatles, nothing would have happened for him. They like to balance the books and can be frugal and eccentric. When it comes to money, they make it in order to buy the most beautiful things in life. They appreciate art and are bohemian. And when they express their love, they make and give gifts, including luxury ones, that are personal and express their affection. It sort of makes me think of when Paul bought his dad a house. I think he also bought him a racehorse, which seemed quite eccentric. And Libra corresponds to the Justice card, which is called Adjustment in the twelfth deck. Either way, these cards are about justice, including karmic justice, law, order, consequences. But in the twelfth deck, we also get the added connotation of the Egyptian goddess of justice, Mut. Crowley said that she was the feminine complement to the Fool card. And what's also interesting is that sometimes he alludes to the idea that after the Aeon of Horus, the next Aeon after that will be the Aeon of Mut. So maybe this will be the next big thing in however many hundreds of years. So we'll move on to Scorpio in the third house, which is about mentality. With this placement, people can make good investigators due to a curious outlook, a good memory for knowledge, and a patient love of research and solving mysteries. They have the ability to analyze deeply and want to know how things tick. They're likely to have a dark sense of humor, an interest in the esoteric or occult, and be quiet about their private lives and secretly suspicious or critical of others. They are good listeners and can calm others easily. They take risks but are also wary of the dangers or consequences, and they are very intense, possibly domineering in their way of communicating. I find all that really interesting, particularly the idea of being a good investigator and being very curious. I think he was quite a curious sort of a man. We're told by Mark Lane of Rush to Judgment fame, that he was very interested in the conspiracy surrounding the death of JFK. And some people believe that that's part of the reason why he was killed in the first place. I think it's one of many factors. I think he was always due to die when he died. But certainly it didn't help him. Getting involved in that sort of thing definitely didn't help him. Anyway, Scorpio corresponds to the Death card, which is about spiritual transformation, endings, new beginnings, and sudden change. And actually, Crowley's version does actually include a Scorpio, as well as a snake and an eagle, which are all meant to be different aspects of death and rebirth. Next, we have Sagittarius in the fourth house, which is to do with home. So in this placement, we have people who are likely to marry a foreigner or live abroad permanently. They have an interest in faraway places, and in a sense, they see the whole world as their home. They have a love of spacious and well-lit homes. They need their homes to be cozy and full of fun and laughter, otherwise they will be depressed. They are approachable, dependable hosts. They are high energy and are often agitated and busy, even at home. And they have a deep need to feel unrestricted and inner peace, especially at home. And certainly, I think home was probably quite important. I think out of all the Beatles, the one that went home the most, I think, was Paul. So none of that really surprises me. Anyway, Sagittarius corresponds to the Temperance card, or Art card, as it's called in the twelfth deck. And these are about balance, harmony, inner peace, and moderation. The Art card specifically is about the royal art of alchemy and about the idea of solve et coagula. Actually has a lot of alchemical imagery on that card. Male and female, yin and yang, fire and water, the white lion and the red eagle, and the Orphic egg in the background, all sorts of things going on there. So next we have Aquarius in the 5th house, which is about love and creativity. So people with this placement tend to be eccentric, unique, rebellious. They prefer not to date in the traditional way. They aim to fall in love with a person's mind. They dislike routine and the banal. They have strange priorities and big dreams. They're romantic, full of fantasy and imagination, progressive and original thinkers. And for them, love has to be real in order to last, or it will just be a series of failures and casual flings. This is also the position for gamblers, both good and bad. I can sort of see that, particularly the casual flings, because he seems to have had quite a few of those. Aquarius corresponds to the Star card, which is about hope, inspiration, spiritual healing, recognition. And in the twelfth deck, this Star card also corresponds to the goddess Nut, or Nut, with the immortal waters of her life as she's pouring them, and the 7-pointed star of Babylon, which you see in the top left side. Next we have Pisces in the 6th house, which is about work and health. So this placement leads to people who are only happy doing something creative, imaginative, or spiritual work, and a desk job is soul-destroying to them. Work involving the healing of others, may be mental or spiritual, not necessarily physical, also appeals to them. They tend to overcommit themselves and then find they struggle to finish a project, sacrificing their physical health to do so. They are usually friendly as colleagues, but their temperamental nature can lead to conflict. They are prone to depression and stress, which seriously affects their physical health. They can be paranoid about their own well-being. I can sort of see how that might be true, but again, it's difficult to say as we don't know what Paul was really like. But anyway, Pisces corresponds to the Moon card, which is about intuition, illusion, deception, and the light created from the dark, which illuminates dreams and nightmares. That's certainly true in the 12th deck card anyway. Now, usually in a system where there are 12 signs in the zodiac and 12 houses for them to occupy, you would have one sign per house. But because Paul's ascendant and descendant signs fall on the cusp between 2 houses, it means those signs occupy 2 houses. And the practical upshot is that Pisces is also in the next house. We should get Aries here, but Aries is actually pushed into the 8th house. So in this placement, with Pisces in the 7th house, we have artistic, imaginative types who are looking for partners who are like-minded. But 2 dreamers in a marriage mean that neither partner wants to think about down-to-earth subjects, which can lead to quarrels. However, they are loving, relaxed, and dutiful towards their partners, and they can do stupid things out of a fear of rejection. And in a business situation, so a business partnership instead, they will expect their partner to deal with details, as they'd rather not be responsible for them. Again, we have Pisces, which corresponds to the Moon card. And then finally we get to Aries, which has been pushed into the 8th house, which is about sex, death, and other people's money. And with this placement, we have decisive people who know what they want. No subject is a taboo to them, including sex, death, and the occult. For these people, seeking the truth is important to them, and they want others to feel the same way. They are often good at giving financial advice, even when it's not wanted. They are passionate lovers, and they might be too spontaneous or aggressive, which leads to quarrels over money. They are often people who have a sudden death, and I find that last point very apt. This talk of other people's money reminds me of an interview that Paul gave the London Evening Standard, where he was talking about John, and that John was the sort of person who'd get really very, very interested in a thing, and he'd go out and buy 14 of something, and then a week later he'd fallen out of love with it, and then he was stuck with a house full of something that he didn't want. 14 of something that he didn't want. And that Paul was very mindful to not be the same way. And this placement makes me think of that interview. So Aries corresponds to the Emperor card, which is about stability, authority, ambition, father figures, and it's the alchemical red or sulfur tincture. This is the corresponding card to the Empress card. So next we have Taurus in the 9th house, which is about journeys. That's not just physical journeys, that's journeys of the mind and body, spirit, about expanding generally. So Taurus in the 9th house presents us with people who are friendly, approachable and valiant, who like fairness and to be judicious when it comes to finances, who are firmly materialistic. They can be stubborn and dogmatic because they are not easily convinced of the new. They prefer to live simply, approaching religion from a practical point of view. They can coexist with the religious and philosophical ideas of others as long as they bring good to the world. And they are excellent with any practical issue, but when others keep hurting or disappointing them, they tend to close off and no longer communicate. They also have a love for travel connected to nature. So some of those are very interesting. I wonder if they're true. Taurus corresponds to the Hierophant card, as we saw before. And this is about traditional institutions, values, religious instruction, patient practice, wise counsel generally. In the twelfth deck, we have a different sort of figure. This figure is really the Pope and Magician of the Aeon of Horus. So next we come to the Midheaven and Gemini in the 10th house, which is about career and status. The Midheaven literally is the highest point on the chart. And this placement brings people who are curious with an urge to explore possibilities, who like to be at the center of activity without being tied to it. They enjoy work that is diverse and fast-moving, often involving communication and writing, which I find interesting. I wonder how much actual writing went on. Their work must be varied and stimulating, otherwise they'll be immediately bored, which I can well see with Paul. These people are often tireless workaholics who successfully manage 2 careers at the same time. Well, maybe he would have done if he'd lived long enough. Also, corresponding the midheaven is the IC, which is basically the lowest point of the chart. Paul's IC is in Sagittarius, and that supplies a breadth of vision via travel or childhood influences, leading to big ambitions. So with the midheaven corresponding with Gemini in the 10th house, again, we have the Lover's card, and the IC, because it corresponds to Sagittarius, also corresponds to the Temperance and Art card. So now we have Leo in the 11th house, and the 11th house is about friendships. So here we have people who are strong-willed, hard-working, honest and loyal, who like to be at the centre of things and to be adored. They are wild and rebellious, they love to entertain and like to be original. They can be domineering and interfering in other people's work. They are popular, but they can get sick of their popularity when it demands too much of them, and they have a hard time letting go. I can well see how that could all be true with Paul. And Leo again corresponds to the Strength and Lust card, which we saw before. So now we have Virgo in the 12th house, which is about the subconscious. And of course, we had Virgo in the 1st house. This is again because we had Virgo and Pisces on 2 cusps between 2 houses. So they've both featured twice. So the placement of Virgo in the 12th house indicates people who can focus on little details and the things that others will miss. They're very disciplined and will develop the most ingenious plans to realize their dreams. They're independent and practical, compassionate and sensitive. They have a strong sense of intuition and the collective consciousness. They worry about details and plans going wrong, leading to an over-analyzing of a situation, and they naturally worry about their health. They hate to ask for help, as it's seen as a sign of failure, and they can be hypercritical of others, although they may not show it. And I can well see, in fact, how pretty much all of those could be true. I know that he was very hypercritical of other members of the band, obviously the Beatles. Before the Beatles were the Beatles, there were many other things. And the band members came and went, and anyone who couldn't play, Paul was always the one who actually said, look, you're dreadful, what are you even doing here? so definitely not shy. Even though the others were thinking it, he was the one that actually said it. So I can well understand some of those points there. I think he really desperately wanted to make the Beatles work by hook or by crook, and obviously he paid the price for it. Anyway, Virgo again corresponds to the hermit, illumination from within and isolation. And before we look at the planets through the houses, I just want to make the point that the double presentation of Virgo and Pisces in the houses has meant that two signs were pushed out, and those two signs were Capricorn and Cancer. And this is sort of an irony, really, because Cancer as a tarot is the Chariot, which always reminds me of Paul and his car crash, and Capricorn is related to the Devil card, which, considering the satanic nature of Paul's very occulted death, is also a fantastic irony. So now we're going to look at the planets through the houses, and we start with the Sun, and we're going to work out from the Sun. So the Sun is in the 10th house, which is the house of career and status. So this is someone who needs to be taken serious professionally, or to be seen as authoritative in some areas. This placement can lead to either glory and honour or scandal and disgrace. Either way, they are likely to be publicly known. Well, that's certainly true. I wonder if we can include psyops in with scandal and disgrace. These people often have a career linked to politics or some other kind of leadership position. They are dependent on the outward trappings of success. They are drawn to a prestigious partner. That sort of makes me think of Jane Asher. Maybe not prestigious, but certainly in a different social class. They usually have a powerful parent, often an ambitious mother. Well, we'll never know, because she died when Paul was 14, and I suspect foul play. I don't think she died just naturally of breast cancer, because she died awfully quickly, suspiciously quickly. I think she was probably the moral guidance and wise counsel of his life, more so than his father. Anyway, the Sun corresponds naturally to the Sun card, which is about positivity, freedom, and the illuminating light of truth. It also has a connection to the sun god Horus. So now we have the Moon in the 11th house, which is about friendship. So with this placement, we have people who develop a sense of belonging through friends or organisations. Friends are used as a means to progress professionally, which was definitely true in Paul's case. They like supporting emotive causes. They have a wide circle of friends, particularly women. Generally very popular. Again, very true. Very popular with women. Often lots of children. Well, yes, but none that he could publicly admit to. Fluctuating goals throughout life. They naturally respond to the feelings of others and know how to affect the views of other people, especially the views of the public, which I found very interesting when you consider the psyop of the Beatles. and that very frequently he did the talking on behalf of the group. If it wasn't John, it was him most of the time. So that's very interesting. And the moon corresponds once again to the high priestess, which is about secret knowledge, intuition, and often secret societies such as the Freemasons. So now we have Mercury, which was retrograde in the 9th house, which is about journeys, all kinds of journeys, not just physical journeys. And so in this placement, we have an attraction to interests that broaden the mind, such as religion, philosophy, politics, and foreign cultures. An insight into a wide range of disciplines. Travel and further education are highlighted, possibly living, studying, or working abroad. They often make talented teachers or writers. They can learn foreign languages quickly. They're excited to see how information affects people's lives and love to offer ideas and advice. I found the foreign language bit particularly interesting, because I think I'm right in saying that when the Beatles went to Hamburg, it was Paul and I think also Pete who learnt German at school, and they mostly got by on their German. But I could be wrong about that. Anyway, Mercury is retrograde. That corresponds to the Magician card reversed, which is connected to black magic and skill and knowledge, but also blocked creative energy. So next we have Venus in the 9th house, which is journeys. So here we have people who develop an idealistic set of values and who are able to inspire others through their own enthusiasm. People who enjoy learning, religion, or art. Intuitive people with fine taste and a love of beautiful things. I think that was definitely true about Paul. He was quite a snappy dresser. Actually, that was one of the ways that, for me as a small child, that I picked him out from Billy. Paul only ever wore black socks, for example. Black socks and black shoes or black boots. You know, there was a sort of simple, elegant way that he dressed. And Billy seemed to wear every colour, often all together. Every colour other than black. Anyway, we also have a love of adventure, travel, or foreign cultures. Travel is likely to be an important part of life. Well, it was, because they were on tour so much of the time. One-to-one relationships might be seen as conflicting with the love of freedom. Definitely went out with a lot of women because they were all throwing themselves at him. Relationships, including romantic ones with people from foreign or culturally different backgrounds, very likely. And again, it makes me think of Jane. Not a culturally different exactly, but in terms of class structure, very different. Her family were from a very different world. And although their partnership was somewhat contrived, I do think there was a genuine affection between Paul and Jane. I always got that feeling. Obviously, he was in the Asher house for other reasons, because they were clearly doing mind control work on him. But even so, I think he did genuinely have affection for Jane. Anyway, Venus corresponds to the Empress, which we saw before, which is about womanliness, motherliness, the creation of life, happiness, beauty, success. And also in the Thoth card corresponds to the alchemical white tincture of salt. So next we have Mars in the 11th house, which is friendship. So here we have people who are trying to realize their ideals and actually achieve their goals, which he definitely did by hook or by crook. They have clear-cut objectives. They find confidence through group activities, which is spot on. They're competitive and possibly offhand with friends. They champion causes, charity work, and encourage others to do the same. Getting actively involved in strikes and other social unrest. Well, in a sort of roundabout way, I guess they kind of did. They're diligent and hardworking, rebellious and independent. And Mars corresponds to the Tower. And the Tower card is about chaos, destruction, and disaster. And in the Thoth card, we actually see the Eye of Shiva at the top, with the idea that in order to destroy everything in an instant, the Eye of Shiva simply needs to blink. So now we have Jupiter in the 10th house, which is about careers and status. So here we have people who seek high office or prominence in career, who want a reputation for integrity and hard work, success that follows from parents or a connection to their hometown, which I find kind of interesting. The whole sort of Liverpool, Merseyside sound. So I've always wondered about that. Anyway, here we have people who cannot tolerate the humdrum, who like comfort, who have a sense of duty, and also hypercritical posturing. And Jupiter corresponds to the tarot card, the Wheel of Fortune, which is about a change of fortune, either good or bad. It's about karma and expansion, and also includes the 3 alchemical primes. So now we have Saturn in the 9th house, which is journeys. Here we have a placement indicating the learning of value of discipline and self-denial. A studious, patient person who carries out all their plans, who likes reflection and meditation. Someone who likes to give practical meaning to abstract concepts. Someone with traditional values, including in business and education. I can certainly see in business, I'm not sure about anything else. Someone who values law and order. Someone who has a talent for administrative functions and an urge to travel. I could see the admin actually, because every time they had to write to anyone or appeal to anyone, it was generally Paul that did the writing in his neatest writing. He was quite businesslike, even though he was sometimes lying in those letters, generally about being older than he really was, or something like that. Anyway, Saturn corresponds to the world or the universe card, and that indicates success, the completion of a cycle, a goal reached, and in the case of the Thoth Tarot, the achievement of the great work. Now we have Uranus in the 9th house, which is journeys. So here we have in this placement the idea of evolving beliefs from personal experience rather than received wisdom, rebelling against tradition, far-reaching but not always practical aims, the ability to sense future trends, which seems very apt, an interest in humanity, a highly alert mind, and someone who likes to travel. So again, Uranus corresponding to the Fool card. So we have originality, freedom, and revolution, which is in common with both Uranus and the Fool. Neptune is in the 1st house, which is about personality. I found that very interesting. So here we have in this placement a heightened awareness of surrounding and others, someone who is not a fighter and can be indecisive, who projects an image of softness, which is rather apt for the cute beetle, who may have identity problems until a more spiritual or artistic path is chosen. Well, he had identity problems by virtue of being replaced, so yes, changeable appearance and image, particularly as Neptune is also close to the ascendant sign Virgo. Again, changeable, yes, because it wasn't him, but also changeable because they were molded into something they weren't. So Neptune again corresponds to the Hanged Man. The Hanged Man is the card of Osiris making his sacrifice, his being slain and reborn, and that's exactly how the occultists felt about Paul. Now we have Pluto in the 11th house of friendship. So here are people who are likely to transform and restore things, people who find self-expression in collectives or teamwork, which was definitely true, people who have the ability to become dynamic and successful leaders, those with powerful and influential friends who help them achieve their objectives, yes, otherwise known as the deep state and the occult controllers, using friends or groups for selfish motives, which I suppose they did, but then of course they got them back because all of their lives were ruined in the end, and highly competitive friendships. And again, we have Pluto corresponding to the Judgment card or Aeon card. All about bringing in the new Aeon of Horus via friendships, which was the Beatles. The North Node is in the 12th house of subconsciousness. So again, we have conflict between transcendental effort and everyday reality, between chaos and order, and between spirituality and reason. And that is partly because whilst the North Node is Virgo, the South Node is Pisces. And so Pisces is in the 6th house of work and health. And advice for this placement includes going beyond the rational and analytical to develop imaginative powers and spiritual awareness. They should stop working so hard and find time for themselves and others. People with this placement should beware a morbid obsession with order, cleanliness, and a rejection of everything that is not in perfect order or cannot be explained. And again, we have the North Node, which is correspondent to Virgo, which corresponds to the Hermit, and the South Node, which is correspondent to Pisces, which is correspondent to the Moon. And we have Lilith in the 9th house of journeys. And again, as I said before, she is a fictional point in space, but she symbolizes a fascination or refusal with topics with which she is connected. Both the fascination or rejection of the given topic can eventually engulf the person and take them away from the human world. So, in short, she is connected to primal urges and the unconscious desires. Lilith in the 9th house is associated with the urge to travel. Other countries can become their home or serve as a stimulus, and this placement generally is about rejecting borders in every possible sense. It sounds quite communistic. Spiritual expectations of the external world create existential tension for these people. Instead, they will want to establish their own beliefs, preferring to find the truth solely through personal experiences and seeing something before they can believe it. And I can definitely see that in Paul. I definitely think he was a person that needed to go through something in order to believe it. That's just my gut feeling about him. Chiron in the 11th house, friendship. So again, Chiron is about trauma that you cannot heal from, and often lessons from the past that are carried forward into the present. And in this placement, we have trauma caused by an inability to implement utopian visions, the impossibility of carrying out reforms in society, and the building of the ideal society. This sounds very communistic, sort of almost ironically so. Disappointment in friends that does not cease to hurt, even in old age, and from time to time this wound reopens. These people have been trying to be independent all their life, but it is as if something is stopping them from realizing this dream. Chiron is associated with the emotional wounds we receive early on in our lives. In this placement, it may indicate rejection from peers because of being different. These people may feel some discomfort in large groups, so they only associate with like-minded people. It sort of reminds me of, how close the Beatles were with each other, even though they were friendly with many, many other people. I always got the impression that they only felt they could really trust one another. They have a capacity for leadership if they can learn to loosen up with strangers. These people have a special thing to do in life. They just have to realize what it is. Well, he definitely had something to do. I think that he probably had quite a lot of karma to work through. We carry on to planetary aspects. We start with the Sun conjunct Mercury, which was retrograde. People with this placement are highly alert mentally and very adaptable. They're good at communication and sharing ideas. They're animated speakers, often witty with a mischievous sense of humour, which he definitely was. A better talker than a listener. likely to be creative and an especially good writer, strong opinions and independent thinking. They're likely to get a bruised ego if their ideas are criticized or ignored. An active learner who prefers to read and study independently rather than passively follow instruction, which I also think is very true about him. Possibly nervous or wired with an inability to relax. And again, we have the Sun corresponding to the Sun card, about positivity, freedom, illumination, the light of truth. It also connects to the sun god Horus. And Mercury in retrograde corresponds to the Magician card reversed, which is about black magic, knowledge and skill, trickery, blocked creative energy, and that sort of thing. Now we have the Sun conjunct Jupiter. And with this placement, we have people who are fundamentally optimistic and want to do good things or the right thing. An outgoing, generous person who appears lucky. Only appears lucky, maybe not actually lucky. I don't think he actually was in the end. He was a lucky man who made the grade and then died as a consequence. Someone who is proud with great self-belief and confidence. Someone who is engaging, warm, entertaining, and funny without going over the top. Who has a love of learning, and long-distance travel makes them liberal, tolerant, broad-minded, and wise. Who are trustworthy, and someone who is insistent on keeping their word. Someone who believes in law, order, fair play, and equality. Which I think he probably did, actually. And again, the Sun corresponds to the Sun card, and Jupiter corresponds to the Wheel of Fortune. And then we have the Sun conjunct Lilith. And Lilith, again, is about secret urges and the unconscious desires. This placement shows someone who is mostly comfortable with their darker side of their own nature, and who is a student of human nature. Someone who has a sexual persona, daring and with a big ego. Someone who is unapologetic about who they are, and they are likely to be highly attractive to others, which he very, very definitely was. And again, the Sun corresponding to the Sun card. Lilith doesn't correspond to a card. Now we have the Sun conjunct the Midheaven, which for Paul was in Gemini. This placement makes people very goal-orientated. Success in career is one of their most essential needs. That was definitely true for Paul, absolutely. Identity is expressed through achievements and hard work. They enjoy a good social standing and are popular. Failure can be devastating and will severely damage self-esteem. They are likely proud and destined for great things. They have leadership qualities but may tend to rebel against authority figures, which I think is probably almost certainly true. And again, we have the Sun corresponding to the Sun, and Midheaven corresponds to Gemini, which is the Lover's card. Now we have the Sun square Neptune, and the square is an alignment between planets that is considered a hard aspect. That is to say, it introduces conflict. So in this placement, we have sensitive and caring people who are likely to fall victim to injustices and will possibly be betrayed. Well, isn't that true? Because of insecurities and gullibility, stronger people will bully or deceive. People affected by the plight of the oppressed and will stand up for them. Possible involvement in controversies and scandals. This is all true so far, I think. Alluring and mesmerizing people. People will want to know their story. People who can excel in creative and entertainment careers. An interest in all things spiritual. But the advice is to avoid the darker psychic realms, gurus, and religious cults. If only he had actually avoided religious cults, he might have lived longer. And also the advice is to take care around fluids, water, medicines, poisons, alcohol, etc. Which I think is very interesting, because I have a gut feeling that perhaps Paul was being poisoned before he died. I have no proof of that. Other than the fact that he seemed to have been physically ill quite a number of times, like with things that looked like food poisoning before he died. So I wonder. Anyway, again, the Sun corresponds to the Sun card, and Neptune corresponds to the Hanged Man, which is again the card of Osiris, reborn and slain. Right, now we have the Sun square the Ascendant, which for Paul was Virgo. So here we have relationship difficulties and incompatibility problems that will either mean sacrificing the friendship or the goals in order to move on. This will lead to dissatisfaction and resentment. A life path with many trials and errors and learning to relate to others and being self-confident. The life lesson here is to be true to oneself and not live as others wish, if only he had. Pleasing others to maintain harmony incurs a loss of respect and abuse by others. Professional success will come with great satisfaction and pride, earning the respect of peers. Healthy, stable relationships will follow. And again, obviously, we have the Sun corresponding to the Sun card, and the Ascendant is Virgo, which corresponds to the Hermit card. Here we have the Moon sextile Mercury in retrograde. This is a soft aspect. Here in this placement we have an engaging and outgoing person, easy to talk to and get along with, although sometimes opinionated. Good social skills and intuitive understanding of people, quickly forming emotional connections. An excellent communicator, intelligent but not seen as intellectual because of a distinctive touch and lively nature. People with this placement make great friends because they can openly share their feelings. They listen to and understand others. They have a playful mind and a youthful spirit. They should make a good parent and enjoy the company of children. Very possibly if he'd lived long enough. These people have neat handwriting, and writing is their particular skill. I think that's really interesting because he did have very neat handwriting, and he actually prided himself on his neat handwriting. They are storytellers, poets, songwriters, and novelists. Well, we wonder how much that was true. I think he probably did write some songs. I just think he had a great deal of help as well. And of course, the Moon corresponds to the High Priestess, and Mercury in retrograde corresponds to the Magician reversed. We have the Moon sextile Lilith, and this is the placement of lovable rogues. They are charming, persuading, and have a sense of sorcery about their demeanour. Either they are a bit of the villain, or they are attracted to people who are. These people have a Peter Pan feel about them. They are eternally young. I suppose you're particularly eternally young if you die at 24. But yes, I think all of that is probably true. And again, the Moon corresponding to the High Priestess. Now we have the Moon square Venus. Again, square is a hard aspect. That means conflict. This placement results in a struggle to satisfy a need for love and affection. Above all, what these people want is a loving, harmonious, and drama-free relationship. They may try to fill the gap with one-night stands and affairs, but this eventually fails to satisfy their constant need for love and affection. They are socially popular, charming, and beautiful. They are lovely people and love being surrounded by fine things. However, in a quest for pleasure, they tend to be ignorant of other people's needs, appearing greedy and wasteful. And again, the Moon corresponds to the High Priestess, and Venus corresponds to the Empress, which, because of the square aspect, means that they're actually both reversed. So the reverse meaning of the High Priestess is misuse of intuition, manipulation, and a lack of emotional control. And for the Empress, the reverse meaning is insecurity and infertility. So a bit of conflict in his love life, I think. Now we have Mercury in retrograde, conjunct Lilith. So with this placement we have the potential to become an influential activist or revolutionary, utilizing their powerful words to combat injustice and tyranny. They refuse to remain silent in the face of opposition, always advocating for respect and fairness. These are individuals with highly intellectual and creative minds. They would excel as a teacher or a revolutionary writer. This placement represents a harmonious yet paradoxical blend of civil and well-mannered demeanour with impulsive and straightforward nature. I think that's very true. I think in lots and lots of press meetings, that was definitely the impression I got of Paul. And again, we have Mercury in retrograde, which corresponds to the Magician reversed. Mercury in retrograde conjunct the Midheaven, which was Gemini. So in this placement, we have people who possess a piercing intellect and communication skills well above average. They are generally unbiased and like communicating their perception of the world, making sense of complex ideas and communicating them in an educational or entertaining style, which is a significant part of their role in life. They can become restless or anxious with nothing to do, so they are always seeking mental stimulation and exciting experiences. They have a tendency to become easily distracted, which could mean difficulty focusing on one subject at a time. When communicating with others, using their heart and their head is essential. They have the potential to become overly intellectual and less intimate unless there is a well-placed moon or Venus, which is interesting because his moon and Venus are square each other, which indicates conflict. Superior communication skills and quick wit will help them advance in their career. They would excel in the media and entertainment industries, which obviously was true. And so we have Mercury retrograde, which corresponds to the Magician reverse, and the midheaven of Gemini, which corresponds to the Lovers. Venus trine the ascendant, which was Virgo. So here, the indication of a beautiful, loving, passionate and kind person. Elegant looks and a sultry sex appeal make them magnetically attractive and very popular. They're likely to be fashionable and a trendsetter. All of that, of course, is true, one way or the other. They can be so popular that they dislike the attention they attract. Appearing confident, they often have the same insecurities to most people. Popularity can even make them a target for critics with unfair and inexplicable vilification. Well, they certainly were a target for critics, but you have to wonder how much of that was even contrived. They have considerable social and diplomatic skills. They are fun friends. Love, sex, and relationships play an essential part in their lives. Making friends and falling in love comes very quickly for these people. They take care with their appearance and like their homes to reflect their appreciation of beauty, harmony, comfort, luxury, and considerable creative talent. This is an excellent aspect for creative professionals. Definitely think all that was true. But definitely think he had a love of beautiful things and strange and eclectic, bohemian sort of things. Anyway, Venus corresponds to the Empress card, and the ascendant, which was Virgo, corresponds to the Hermit. We have Mars sextile Saturn. So this indicates tremendous drive and endurance. They gain the respect and admiration of superiors because of their strong work ethic and trustworthiness. Because they are so dependent and robust, they would do well in any field that rewards continuous effort. In relationships, they are equally loyal and dependent for the long haul. However, being too cautious and holding on to anger can cause tension within their close relationships. People may seek them out for safety and security. They may act as a mentor or protector to younger or weaker people. Their strength and dependability suggest good leadership qualities. They should at least earn their fair share of recognition and promotion. Well, he definitely did that. And again, we have Mars, which corresponds to the Tower, and Saturn, which corresponds to the World or Universe card. Now we have Mars sextile Uranus. So this placement indicates an adventurous type that inspires others through their actions. They seek excitement and attract a lot of activity around them. Definitely true. Risk-taking is their strong point, and they should always trust their instincts. Maybe he didn't trust his instincts. They have high energy levels and spontaneity that may unnerve people around them. They're very independent and need freedom in relationships and their career. An eccentric style that will attract similar people, but will also make some enemies. That's probably true. These people are the ones that get things moving, having the initiative, motivation, and inspiration to start bold projects. An electric magnetism, which is physically, sexually, and intellectually attractive. They entertain and excite others beyond their wildest fantasies. No wonder there are so many sex symbols with this aspect. Well, they certainly wanted that to be true for the cute beetle. And again, Mars corresponding the Tower card, and Uranus corresponding to the Fool card. Now we have Mars conjunct Pluto. So in this aspect, we have a powerful desire to achieve goals. Strength, passion, and courage are their strong points, but an indomitable will and tendency towards manipulation brings enemies and hinders success. Personal relationships can be volatile until they learn to harness their intense energy. They can sometimes turn to coercion and subversive actions if they don't get their own way. They can influence others in life-changing ways, so it is essential to consider the consequences, especially for weaker or more suggestible people. True, but I doubt they worried about that. It is critical they harness their power for good. Which makes me think of that interview with Billy. If you've got power, you've got to use it for the good. They may have karmic issues. Well, I definitely think he had karmic issues. Or some kind of connection to crime, slavery, rape, torture, or violence. There was something going on in his karmic past, I'm telling you, that he had to work it out in this life. And again, we have Mars corresponding to the Tower card, and Pluto corresponding to Judgment or the Aeon, which is the Aeon of Horus card, which I think that particular aspect, Mars conjunct Pluto, I think that's one of the more interesting in this entire chart. Jupiter conjunct the Midheaven, which is in Gemini. So here we have enthusiastic and ambitious people with a broad outlook and willingness to do good by everyone. Whilst career and personal goals are important, their community spirit and generosity means they keep the welfare of others in mind. I wonder how true that was. A vast knowledge and many interests. Travel would be an excellent way to broaden their horizons. It is essential that they love their work or at least like it. More than any other aspect, Jupiter conjunct Midheaven offers the chance of making a career out of their favourite subject or hobby. Wasn't he lucky? It makes sense because Jupiter's about expansion. They may become a leader in their field. They normally have a solid moral and ethical code that earns them the respect of their peers. They will always want to keep learning and exploring and should enjoy prosperity and a good fortune professionally. Well, briefly, yes. However, one drawback with this natal aspect is the possibility of taking things too far. They may become too obsessed or passionate about their particular interest. And again, Jupiter corresponds to the Wheel of Fortune, and the Midheaven, which is in Gemini, corresponds to the Lovers. We have Jupiter square Neptune, which is a hard aspect, so there's conflict here. So in this placement, we have people who exude an inspirational enthusiasm that seems infectious. This uplifting effect on others may stem from some rather intense inner energy, as if they work through their self-questioning by sharing their discoveries or creations. Their work is a manifestation of their hopes and dreams. Some magically creative gifts do, however, need some application and a certain amount of discipline to be fully realized. Well, they certainly did work their little butts off to get where they were, regardless of how much they were helped along the way. Over-optimism, fantasies and escapism through drugs will only lead to embarrassment, loss and disappointment. However, these early experiences push them positively, encouraging them to make a big impression in their chosen field. Realizing there are no shortcuts to success gives them firm faith. I think it's very interesting about the drugs, because there were certainly lots of drugs sloshing around in the Beatles' story, even by the time that Paul died. They all smoked, they all drank, they all did prellies, particularly when they were in Hamburg to try and stay awake. They all did pot. I'm not sure if Paul did, but certainly they'd done coke and LSD by the time he died. I don't think Paul did, though. But certainly lots of drugs sloshing around. And again, Jupiter corresponding to the Wheel of Fortune card and Neptune corresponding to that Hanged Man. And because it's a square aspect, they're both reversed. So the Wheel of Fortune now indicates setbacks. The Hanged Man is about sacrifice, feeling trapped in stagnation. Saturn conjunct Uranus. So in this placement, we have highly self-aware and creative people who are also practical and well-grounded. Their pragmatic approach to life helps them function in a highly energized state. Although this sustained high energy creates much inattention, it is also the source of their creative genius. Relationship difficulties may include coldness, love triangles, affairs, domestic violence, sadomasochism, and separation. Substance abuse is also possible to relax or maintain the high productivity and creativity that people have come to expect of them. That's all very interesting. I wonder how much dark stuff was actually going on. They are independent, motivated, and enthusiastic, usually well-mannered and well-groomed. They have a refined appearance, which he definitely did. They learn by experience and continually reinvent themselves. The ability to shift looks dramatically with ease and always keep people guessing makes them sexy, provocative, and fascinating. They can also make strategic indifference and aloofness an asset or weapon. This allows them to give orders and offers a great potential for leadership positions and corporate success. Definitely, I think he was one of the talkers on behalf of the band, along with John, so maybe that comes into it there. So Saturn again corresponds to the world or the universe card, and Uranus corresponds to the Fool. Now we have Saturn sextile Pluto. So this aspect indicates a steely indication and endurance with which they put to practical use to create something of value, something lasting. Well, the Beatles are very much enduring, that's for sure. They have a fantastic ability to focus on a particular project and see it to completion. They keep probing and working hard like a machine. Systems and order are a high priority in their lives. Saturn sextile Pluto also gives incredible endurance and recuperative powers. They can face any challenge or crisis head-on and be a source of strength for others. Unless you don't have your head on, of course. These people are survivors and can function efficiently on very little. Respect and high recognition can come from their achievements. And again, the Saturn corresponding to the world or universe, and Pluto corresponding to judgment or the aeon. Very much the great work at play there. Saturn square the North Node, which is in Virgo. In this placement we have possible rigid habits and a detachment from societal norms, creating a sense of isolation. Escaping this influence can be challenging. They may find themselves stubbornly clinging to the past, bound by old methods and mindsets. Their outlook may be gloomy or pessimistic, and others may perceive them as miserly or selfish. These attitudes stem from major circumstances in their past life or early childhood that shaped a restrictive worldview. I find that really interesting. I wonder if that was true. Despite these challenges, Embracing the positive aspects of Saturn, such as discipline, responsibility, organization, and a respect for boundaries, can lead to remarkable mastery and expertise. By focusing on these qualities, they can excel in their endeavors and stand apart from the competition. Well, mastery was obviously very important. Paul may not have been a session player or of that quality, but I think he was still, a competent player. And I think doing well and playing well did actually matter to him. And again, we have Saturn corresponding to the World or Universe card, and the North Node, which is in Virgo, corresponding to the Hermit. Because of the square aspect, both of these things are now in reverse. So that means that the World reversed indicates a lack of success, stagnation, a lack of achievement, disappointment, burden, and lack of competition. And the Hermit reversed indicates loneliness, paranoia, isolation, and paralyzed by fear. Now we have Uranus trine Neptune. This harmonious aspect gives people a desire for meaningful life, but this desire is weak and needs help of other planets in order to manifest itself. It also reinforces fantasy. Just like the conjunction, but not as strongly, this aspect leads to originality, great creativity, and innovative inspiration. Uranus is the power of awakening, which often means that there will be some disruption and change. Events under the influence of Uranus are unexpected or unpredictable, forcing us to do things in a new way and face the truth about this or that issue. Neptune is the lord of the invisible empire, which is a mysterious name for a mysterious planet. Perhaps we should describe it as a dimension of life that cannot be experienced by our five senses, and we can only understand and perceive it in our imagination. And again, Neptune corresponds to the Hanged Man, and Uranus corresponds to the Fool card. Now we have Uranus sextile Pluto. And in this placement we find creative genius and a reformer, an eccentric who's ahead of their time, intensely driven to lead by example and improve the world, guided by intuition and a sense of destiny, adapting old existing ideas to contemporary needs, and although unorthodox and sometimes initially unacceptable, their innovations gain support because they are trendsetters. They push the boundaries of what is accepted. They are subconsciously linked to their generation and its futuristic ideals. And how true is that? Curiosity about death and immortality may lead to an interest in religion, spirituality, and occult subjects. I don't think he had a choice about that, to be honest, given the company he kept. They have a wide circle of friends who share a love of art, culture, and social issues. They have an intense opposition to slavery, exploitation, racism, and sexism that can lead to activism or reform, which I definitely think in part was true. I mean, obviously it was part of the psyop, but I also think that, for example, the Beatles did not like playing anywhere where segregation took place, and they very much spoke out against it, and I think they would have done regardless of whether or not they'd been told to. I kind of get that impression about them. Anyway, Uranus again corresponds to the Fool, and Pluto corresponds to the Judgment or Aeon card. And now we have Uranus square the North Node. Again, a hard aspect, so conflict. Here we have a challenging aspect that invites these people to embark on a personal journey of self-discovery and liberation. Rather than being bound by societal expectations, this aspect encourages them to break free and embrace their own unique path. Career opportunities may arise that disrupt traditional career paths, urging them to explore unconventional fields or pursue innovative ideas. Well, if being a pop star is not unconventional, then I don't know what is. Unpredictable and rebellious energies may influence their relationships, leading to unexpected changes and a need for greater personal freedom. A desire for intellectual independence pushing them to question established beliefs and seek unique educational experiences that challenge the norm. This aspect encourages a liberation of the mind, including unconventional spiritual practices and inner growth that pushes the boundaries of tradition. Well, it was all of that, wasn't it? The whole psyop and everything to do with the occult aspects of Paul and Paulism are all about pushing into a new world. And again, we have Uranus corresponding to the Fool, and the North Node, which is in Virgo, corresponding to the Hermit. And we have a square aspect here. So the Fool is seen in its reckless and naive aspect, with the Hermit seen as loneliness, paranoia, and being paralyzed by fear. Now we have Uranus trine the ascendant, which is in Virgo. These people are open-minded, creative, and experimental. Independence is important to them. Although eccentric, people accept them because they are lively, engaging, and accepting of everyone. They prefer to find things out for themselves because learning by experience is more exciting and interesting than formal education. They push the boundaries of society and relationships. However, their intention is to increase awareness rather than cause a revolution. Or I don't know, probably both. They are likely to be a rebel. Their unusual tastes may be reflected in their partners. It might be easier for them to find a long-term relationship with someone from a different cultural background or simply someone lively and open-minded. They gravitate towards eccentric people, original types, who think outside the box. They move away from anything routine or boring. And again, Uranus corresponding to the Fool, and the ascendant in Virgo corresponding to the Hermit. Now we have Uranus conjunct the ascendant. So not just trine, but also conjunct. Here we have a strong need for independence and a rebellious streak. These people are experimental and original and have trouble conforming to tradition or societal standards. A life full of change and excitement may lead to an unsettled feeling or inability to relax. Their intimate relationships may suffer from an inability and lack of commitment. They need an open-minded partner who accepts their need for space and freedom. These people need to take care that their vague sense of humour and need for stimulation do not lead to teasing other people. The more boring their routine is, the more trouble they will cause trying to make changes. As a result, they could be labelled a rebel or traitor. It is essential for these people to be comfortable with being unique and different from the norm. Once they find their niche, they pour creative energy into something constructive and productive and do something special. Well, special is one word for it. Again, we have Uranus corresponding to the Fool and the ascendant in Virgo corresponding to the Hermit. Now we have Neptune conjunct the ascendant, which is Virgo. Here we have a sensitive, caring and spiritual person, seeing the world from a very different perspective from other people. They may well be psychic, if only he had been. Forming normal, meaningful relationships can be a struggle because they don't understand how they should act around others. They might have different personas for different people and situations. Well, that's one way to put it. This reminds me of a press conference that the Beatles gave, and they asked about the Beatles' reputation and image. And Paul said, well, you're the ones that write about it. You should know about it. I mean, we know what our image is, and it's nothing like our real image. And then he gave a sort of knowing wink and smile. It was quite amusing. They are easily upset by bullying and violence. Their sensitivity can affect their health. Unfortunately, they are more susceptible than others to addiction, poisoning, and overdose. I wonder how much, again, this goes back to the way that he was killed and handled before he was killed. I suspect he was subject to bullying and violence and quite possibly being poisoned. But that's just a personal feeling. Anyway, they may look to religion, spirituality, or philosophy as a framework or moral compass. They are likely to have an artistic career. Mysteries and secrets fascinate them, and they could be a spy. However, it is essential to stick to some moral code, otherwise they could abuse their gifts and deceive people. Lying and forgery would eventually end in disappointment and disgrace. Well, it certainly would if anyone knew about it. And again, the ascendant is corresponding to Virgo, which corresponds to the Hermit, and Neptune corresponds again to the Hanged Man. Now we have Neptune square Lilith, and in this aspect, they may cling to religion or spirituality to find their individuality. Also, they can't differentiate external standards from internal goals and desires. They can't comprehend the judgments of others. They may feel that no one understands them. They may feel that they are never able to effectively communicate their intentions and feelings. That is why they sometimes have trouble accepting responsibility for their actions. Valuable life lessons come from their traumas. Then they become an inspiration to those still caught up in the darkness. Getting out to nature is extremely valuable to people with this placement. And again, because it's square, it makes the cards reversed. So we have again the message about sacrifice, feeling trapped, and stagnation. Now we have Neptune square the midheaven, which is in Gemini. So in this placement, we have people who are romantic, sensual, optimistic, and misunderstood, and sometimes controversial. These are particularly impressionable people when very young. Neptune probably had a weakening, distorting, or insidious influence on the home environment and parents. I think that's really interesting because I really wonder about the kind of background he actually came from, particularly on his father's side. Disadvantage, poverty, loss, fear, guilt, and confusion are some things they experience whilst growing up. Definitely in the form of losing his mother, for sure. Even when born into a wealthy family, one of their parents likely had strange, immoral, or unethical beliefs or behaviours that affected their outlook on the world. There may be scandal or notoriety attached to their family name. I wonder if that's true. I really wonder about his father and his father's family. It's essential for people with this placement to associate with those who are genuine and honest in their dealings. Self-confidence comes from protecting themselves against deception, scandal, exploitation, and the weakening effect of drugs and alcohol. Basically everything that he actually encountered. And all of the reasons why he ended up dead at 24. Over-idealization in relationships may lead to disappointment and confusion. Controversy in private life can threaten the stability of public life. Their indiscretions may gain more attention than their professional achievements. Well, that would be certainly true again if most people ever actually knew about them. And again we have Neptune corresponding to the Hanged Man, and the Midheaven, which is in Gemini, corresponding to the Lovers. Because of the square aspect, both cards are now reversed. So we have the message of sacrifice, feeling trapped in stagnation, with disharmony and distrust. Now we have Lilith conjunct the Midheaven, which is in Gemini. And this placement shows an alluring persona and presence, often grabbing the attention of the space they are in as they exude a raw, seductive energy. The Midheaven is the career point, and when Lilith is conjunct that point, it means that the person is extremely competitive in their career area. This placement implies that there was unfaithfulness in the parents' relationship, which is interesting, because I've often wondered who his actual parents are, because he sort of half looks like his father, but he doesn't look anything like his mother. Lilith at the Midheaven is an autocrat who demands respect and can take all of the rest of the personality down with her. People need a Lilith to direct them, especially when all other leaders have proven themselves duplicitous and untrustworthy. It's quite an irony in that statement. And again, obviously, as I said, Midheaven corresponds to Gemini, which corresponds to the Lovers. And then the last placement, Lilith square the ascendant, and the ascendant again is Virgo. This placement shows a person whose personality or mask may be off-putting to others. Even when they try to seem pleasing, people still see the worst qualities of the Lilith expressed in the ascendant. Those Lilith-related taboos come out in a way that makes others nervous. They still have a captivating side to their personality, like any other Lilith ascendant aspect, but this element of the personality tends to scare people and push them away. They may have the aura of being surrounded by death or scandal, or perhaps they just have an inexplicably taboo energy. Others feel nervous in general, as though they're hiding a deep, dark secret, even if it's not true, which of course it was. For people with Lilith square the ascendant, they must learn to show the truest expression of themselves, even if others don't like it. Over time, they'll actually become more appealing to others once this Lilith is integrated. The ascendant is corresponding to Virgo, which is hermit. The square aspect makes it reversed, so we have loneliness, paranoia, and being paralyzed by fear. So now we've gone through 80-something slides. I want to thank you at this point for sticking with me to the end. And before I go, I'm just going to go through a summary of all of those ideas. Some repeated ideas that came up. Being intelligent and having a career related to the creative and entertainment industries. A career related to friendships and knowing people in higher positions. A strong desire to succeed. Someone who plans to turn their hobby into a career. A nonconformist and likely to be a leader for social change and a trend setter. A good public speaker, maybe a writer of some kind. Valuing novel things and people and being easily bored with the humdrum. A love of fine things, places and art. Being fun, witty and attracted to mysteries. A strong belief in fair play. The importance of travel, possibly connected to a career path or study. Being slow to love but loyal. Being a sex symbol, charming and popular with women, and likely to have a partner from a different background. Psychologically ill at ease, easily bullied, and likely to be betrayed. Drugs cited as a potential problem. Someone connected with controversies and scandals, possibly through the family name. Unresolved karmic issues and secrets, and likely to have a sudden death. I think they're all really super interesting, and I think a lot of those did apply. I really wanted to do this chart because I think everything about the Beatles psyop, Paul is dead, and the McCartney conspiracy, everything comes back to this chart because I think the occultists, the controllers, they planned and waited for someone like Paul with this kind of a chart. And once he was born, everything else fell into place, and their whole plan that had been prophesized could suddenly take shape. So I wanted to do justice to this chart, and I spent a very great amount of time on it. I went to a dozen different websites. I redrew up his chart 4 times. I went through dozens of books, and everything I've just read to you is the consolidation of all of that work. I hope you've enjoyed this. Thank you very much for watching, and goodbye.